Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Purple Elephant Podcast, where we name the real issues holding organizations back from alignment, equity, and impact. And we work from the root to fix them. I'm your host, Janora Ledbetter, and today I have the privilege of sitting down with someone I not only admire, but also had the honor of working alongside. Mary Ann Ott, Executive Director of New Alliance Foundation. This foundation has a vision of a community where all people can reach their fullest potential. Their mission is to support organizations that advance literacy, build community, and dismantle systems that perpetuate poverty and racism. They live out values like inclusivity, accessibility, fairness, responsiveness, and an unwavering commitment to racial equity. Marianne, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Janora. I'm delighted to be here.
So let's start with the heart. I want to know what continues to anchor your leadership at New Alliance Foundation? What keeps you grounded in the work, even on the hard days?
Well, I love my job. And I stay grounded by listening closely when I can. I try to listen to grantees. I listen to leaders in the community, and I try to listen to those who are most impacted by our work and our decisions. We can't fund every organization that applies to us, but it's important to still listen to where those needs are. We serve extraordinary people. The organizations, the work that they do, they're led by exceptional people. They look for honesty from us, ethics, and accountability, really. And those things remind me why I do this work. Part of staying anchored is just returning to our core purpose, where our intention is to support a more just, inclusive, and vibrant community. And as long as we keep our eye on why we're here, we stay grounded.
Absolutely. And it's very, very important to be able to stay grounded in the work, especially
Yes.
now during this time.
Yes, yes,
So
absolutely.
you're
It's especially challenging, actually. The organizations are being hit with all kinds of funding cuts, and they're having to lay off staff and cut back services. So, the listening is really important.
Absolutely. So I know that your mission, it centers on advancing literacy, building community, and also dismantling systems of poverty and racism. And so those I feel are really bold and layered commitments. How do you hold on to those values when the work gets complex and especially when it gets messy?
Well, we have to be clear on our purpose but at the same time be transparent about our limitations. We're a small foundation. We're a $30 million foundation. We have two full-time staff. We have a part-time admin. Our grant making budget is $1 million a year, and we serve in 42 of Connecticut's communities. So we have limitations, but if we can stay clear about our purpose, the organizations, as I just remarked, are going through a difficult time right now, and we can't make up for the federal funding losses, but we can find other ways of supporting organizations. For example, one of the things that we're concerned about is the stress that the organizations are under and how the staff are holding up under this extreme pressure. So we're looking for ways of convening small groups and allowing organizations to interact with each other, share resources, help each other, and just feel supported. So it's kind of staying rooted in our purpose that I think helps the most in terms of, handling the work when it gets complicated and messy. And also, I'd add to that being creative in how we can address needs when we don't have the funds to do everything that we want to do.
Yeah, I can imagine that must be
Yeah.
difficult
Yeah.
to navigate. So I know that a couple of years ago, we went through a strategic assessment process together.
Yeah.
And I know that was no small undertaking. What made you at that time say, now is the time? And what were you hoping would come out of it?
Yeah. Well, honestly, the very public murder of George Floyd sent shockwaves through the entire philanthropic community. And we were no exception. Philanthropy in general and New Alliance Foundation in specific took a hard look at who we are, what we do, and how we do it. We knew that we knew we were doing good work, but did we really recognize what barriers were in place for certain sectors of the community to have access to us? We have a lot of strong relationships, but at a grassroots level, for emerging organizations, for neighborhood-based initiatives, we were really not available. And we also didn't know with certainty that we were funding the right things. The foundation, although we have a diverse board, at the time the staff was white. No one on the staff had ever experienced poverty or racism. So, how is it that we would know what needed funding and where we could be the most impactful with our grant making? And we asked ourselves, where are our relationships? We couldn't assume that what worked in the past would be enough for the future. So the board wanted us to pause, reflect, and they asked some hard questions about our relevance and the kind of impact we were having and where our responsibilities were. My hope was to emerge with greater clarity. The board is part of the process. We needed a sharper focus and do more than just state our values, but really align it in a more connected way with actions. So, that's what really led us to now being the time. It was a wake-up call, really, and a long overdue wake-up call, I must say.
Absolutely. I feel like 2020 was a huge turning point. I feel like before
Yeah.
that, we were all just moving around really fast.
Yes.
And, when the pandemic hit, that's when everything slowed down. People were home and they were able to see the social injustices that were always happening because the
That's
social
right.
injustices were always happening in this world, but people were actually paying attention. It was actually being televised. And I
Yeah.
feel like the George Floyd incident that happened really was the catalyst that awakened DE&I, it awakened racial equity and justice, and really had organizations looking within their organizations to say, okay, how does this affect us? And, what message do we want to put out to the community?
That's right. And it wasn't only happening in philanthropic circles. It was really, I mean, the nonprofit organizations were asking the same questions. I think many corporations, social service programs, I mean, everyone was asking, how did we get here and what can we do and how are we contributing to the problems? I mean, George Floyd was not the first, but he was certainly the most public murder that, we had seen on television and in the media. It's too bad it took that long, honestly. But I think we did change. The community did change. Some of that's being rewinded now in the circumstance we're in with our current government. But at the time, it was a real eye opening moment for us.
Yeah, I'm curious during that process, I want to know what surprised you the most, either about the organization or your team or even yourself as a leader. Like, what came up for you during that time?
Yeah, I think what surprised me the most was how ready my board and staff and myself were ready for honest reflection and bold thinking. There was definitely a shared willingness to question long-held assumptions, and I was really pleasantly surprised how people working together, we were willing to lean into our discomfort. Talking about race and equity is often not comfortable. And I realized how important it was that we have a space for people to be vulnerable in, what they expressed. And I guess too that it was okay that we didn't always have the answers, right? I think those coming to terms with that was a good part of the process. And I was surprised. The board, we were a really good team, supporting and working out, our thoughts, ideas, experiences. I thought it
Yeah.
was, the time was right. The time was right.
Yeah, the timing was right, and you're absolutely correct. Having those conversations can be uncomfortable, even now, more so than before,
Yeah.
and especially with this administration making it seem like these are bad things to talk about when it's really not. To work somewhere where there is an equitable environment, where people are feeling included, where we're focusing on things where people are being singled out is really important. And if you want to really create an organization that's thriving and an organization where people are happy to come to work, those are the conversations you have to have.
Yeah. Janora, I remember well that in this process, you often played a role of gently but firmly, calling attention to things people said, their perspective, and, kind of you were very supportive in their growth and widening understanding of the issues. And, you were non-judgmental. And that kind of support in this process really, really builds trust. And that's such an important component of doing this work and looking at your organization and your team and your leadership. I mean, it was so important to have that right environment. And, you had a lot to do with that.
Really appreciate you saying that. It was very fun working with you and working with your board. So I enjoyed the work that we did together. It's the hard conversations have to be had, but yes, I like to go into them in a very delicate way to make sure that the conversations are being had, but people are also feeling comfortable.
That's right. It's really important.
So I know one of our shared goals was to build stronger connections with diverse community stakeholders, the people and also the organizations directly impacted by your funding. What did you learn about the importance of trust and listening?
Well, that's the foundation. I guess, trust and listening can't be just values in philanthropy. They have to be the work itself. Building relationships, it takes time. Like just it does personally for all of us. You don't necessarily trust a stranger or trust someone in power automatically, right? And really, in many ways, philanthropy is in the power seat, right? We can control what we fund and what we don't fund. Building authentic relationships, you slow down, you show up, you have to be willing to hear the hard truths. We did a foundation convened community conversations where we heard directly from the organizations, both those we fund and those we haven't funded or those that we've declined. And we had small groups. We sat in a room together. We had it facilitated so that no one would feel that the foundation's presence there was going to in some way impact their future opportunity to receive a grant. And hard questions were asked, and we got very direct, honest answers. And what we heard is still informing changes that, we're making at the foundation. It's through these relationships that our grant making can become more responsive and equitable and ultimately more impactful. And, it was our goal to build these stronger relationships, but we had to do the work.
Absolutely. I feel like many foundations talk about equity, but very few commit to that structural change. So I am curious, what advice would you give to other funders who were hesitant to make bold internal shifts?
Well, advice, start within, I guess. I'd say structural change begins when you examine your own systems, your own power dynamics. We all make assumptions and it's not easy, but we expect our grantees to be courageous and innovative. So we have to hold ourselves to the same standard. Equity, it's a daily practice. It requires humility, discomfort. And I think probably another piece of advice is being willing to give up control. I think that's one of the hardest shifts for funders. I mean, we're looking at things like, uh, more general operating support, the possibility of making multi-year commitments in our grant making. The board has been looking a lot at participatory grant making, where you have community members participating in the decision, letting others in the community determine our funding priorities. We have to act more like partners in the community. And then the other thing is that I'm learning is that nothing is really happening overnight and it's really a long game. Equity can't be a trend or the flavor of the moment. It has to be a long-term commitment, and there's going to be missteps, and you have to own your mistakes, but keep and remain committed to the goal, which is a more equitable society.
Absolutely. I did get a sense that sometimes a lot of people think that DE&I and equity and inclusion, that it is a trend and that they're jumping on a bandwagon of
Yeah,
certain steps you do to follow the flavor of the month or what have you. And it isn't. It's an everyday practice that has to be embedded in every aspect of the organization.
yeah. Not always easy, but stay committed and you can get there. You can get there.
Yeah.
And change is hard and it's slow and it doesn't always go smoothly.
It doesn't, especially when you have pushback, especially when you have an administration that's making it seem like it's a really bad thing. It's very sad to see a lot of organizations who were walking the walk and talking the talk 4 years ago, all of a sudden just change and drop things or rearrange things. It shows, okay, when things are important, you're not taking a stand, right? And then if you don't take a stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
If you imagine the community New Alliance serves 5 years from now, what do you hope will be true because of the foundation's work?
Well, I guess that children and families everywhere where we live in our community and those who are most often overlooked have greater access to opportunity. Whether we're building strong literacy programs, a vibrant arts experience, safe and welcoming communities. You want to imagine a place where there's opportunity for everyone. And I'd like to see that the local nonprofit organizations that are so committed to this work feel seen and trusted and supported, not only with our funding, but with relationships that affirm their leadership and that they have the support they need to survive through change and challenge. And then it would be really, rewarding if the voices of community leaders and young people and those doing the work, educators, are engaged in shaping solutions to the challenges that they face in the community. And that the foundation, is a listener and more of a partner instead of, a gatekeeper, instead of, thinking that we know what communities need and just doing better listening and being viewed as a partner instead of some kind of authority, granting money.
Absolutely. That's the real purple elephant right there, being a partner and not a gatekeeper.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my last question for you is, what does it mean to truly be a responsive, equitable funder in today's world? And then what does that require from leaders like you?
Well, to be a truly responsive leader, I guess means recognizing that philanthropy doesn't exist outside of the system that it intends to influence. We're part of the systems. We're not on the outside looking in, right? I think to really truly be responsive, means that we listen more than we speak and trust those people that are closest to the issues, that are living some of these issues. If we're to be responsive, it means meeting the moment. I mean, whether that's the pandemic, which we all, recently survived, the reckoning of George Floyd's murder, and now the shortfall when the federal government is cutting funding to these organizations. You have to look beyond the urgency of now and help communities and help these organizations build long-term resilience. So, our strategic plan was really about our effort, to do that. For me personally, I think it's demanded humility because I don't know all the answers, but courage, to face the reality of where we are, and then having accountability, like not making promises we can't keep. I know we don't have all the answers. And take risks. I mean, not everything we do is going to work or address the intended need we started out trying to support. But if we don't take risks, we don't learn anything either. And, we have to be sure that what we say we're going to do, we do. And we have to be willing to learn and develop the trust. So, to believe that when we partner with a shared purpose, we get closer to a just community for everyone.
Absolutely. The funding cuts, it can feel like the rugs being pulled out from under you, but
Yeah.
they don't, it doesn't have to mean the end of an organization's mission, because the organizations that are making it through, they aren't just lucky, they've really built strong, flexible, strategic plans that prepare them for change. And so that means knowing your non-negotiables, diversifying your revenue, using data to back your decisions, planning for multiple scenarios, and not just like the best case ones. So
Right.
I
No.
feel like when organizations are treating strategic plans like a living, breathing guide and
Yep.
not just a document
Yep.
that you dust off every 3 years, you're giving the organization that resilience to weather funding challenges and still be able to move forward with purpose.
Yep. No, you're right. And, so many organizations, they're lean in their staffing, which means that they can be nimble and they can adapt and adjust. I mean, it's not without stress, right? And if you have a strong foundation to begin with, yes, you have a higher likelihood of surviving. But even when you have budget cuts and it means potentially eliminating a program, you have capacity to redirect and develop, a leaner program or a program that can operate with, more volunteers than, you might have employed before. It's very different from when corporations or companies have to make cuts, because they're serving that bottom line of revenue and profit. In the nonprofit community, it's always about the people, and it's amazing. It really is amazing how organizations find ways to meet their mission and stay true given, what they face constantly. Not only funding challenges, but like the pandemic when everything shut down, it's just they're extraordinary people, and it is such a privilege to be in a position to support their work. It really is. I'm forever grateful for what I do and what I learn every day from them.
Yes, those crisis moments, they're gonna test whether your mission is just words on a wall or truly the
That's right.
backbone of your
That's
work.
right. That's right. Yeah,
So, Marianne, thank you so much for your time, your
absolutely.
leadership, and for the important work that you're doing uh, in philanthropy. It's not just generous, it's just. And I know that this conversation is going to inspire leaders and funders and change makers who are listening to this. I had such a fun time working with you. And I know Sharon Donosky was also
Yep.
working with us as well.
Yep.
And it was fun. It was a really great experience. I enjoyed working with you. I enjoyed working with your board. I loved doing the interviews, getting a chance to know everybody.
Yeah. No, it's great work, and you're good. You're good at what you do, Janora. So
So thank
That's
you.
helpful too. No, always a pleasure to work with, and it was great to learn alongside you in the work.
Thank you so much. So, this has been the Purple Elephant Podcast. If today's episode sparked something for you, share it with a colleague, follow us on your favorite podcast platform, and join the conversation about building organizations that actually live their values. Until next time, keep naming the elephant in the room and keep doing the work that matters.